very welcome to this session where we are going to be working on developing educational competences for education for soil health. And obviously the work that you guys are doing will be feeding into the bigger European project. I think this is one of the first workshops happening on this across Europe. So that's fantastic. And we're very lucky to have a very knowledgeable panel here with us today. And I'm going to invite Dr. Karen Kerr to speak first. Karen works here in Queen's. She's a lecturer in the School of Social Sciences, Education and Social Work. And her lecturing is on teacher professional development, particularly, so she's in the School of Education. Her main research interests are in outdoor learning and science education. She started her career as a primary school teacher before moving into academia. And most recently, she's looked at the outcomes of outdoor learning for children to include connections to nature, health and well-being and attitudes to learning science outdoors. She's also a director of the Northern Ireland charity Northern Ireland Environment Link, which is the main networking body for organisations interested in natural and built environment in Northern Ireland. Karen, are you able to share your screen, do you think? Let's see how we get on with this.
So it's saying only meeting organisers and presenters can share.
Well, are you a presenter? Can I make you a presenter? Let me see.
So that's the big question, isn't it?
Uh-huh. You'd almost think I haven't done this before. Sorry?
I have the same settings, so if
you have the same settings.
So if Karen can't share, then neither can I.
Good point. I think now, hold on, I'm trying to remember how I did this for someone else recently. No, how did I do that the last time?
It said when you were on her facing the side, make a presenter.
Oh, did it?
Oh,
Yeah. Is that you need the profile pictures on the side?
oh, on the participants, the other people.
Yeah.
Well spotted. We have all sorts of
There we
expertise in the
go.
room. Yeah.
Just like that.
There you go. Thank you. Thank you for your patience.
No, don't worry, don't worry. Okay, so I'm just going to share. Give me 2 seconds. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah, grand, all good. Yep. Okay, so thank you very much, Emma, for that lovely introduction. I'm just going to spend a few minutes talking about education for sustainability and outdoor learning. So this is an area that of growing momentum, I guess, internationally, but as well as within Queen's. And I'm always keeping up to date and, you know, taking part in different sort of professional development programs, etc., around education for sustainability. I started out very much looking at outdoor learning, and obviously now that has grown and morphed, and with more of a focus on education for sustainability. So I think one of the big areas that we need to be thinking about, obviously, is climate change and how that's communicated. So normally with my student teachers, who are all going to be future science teachers in secondary schools in Northern Ireland, normally the first question we get asked is, well, how can I help? What can I do, you know, with young people in classrooms and beyond that, I suppose. But one of the big things that we can all do is what's suggested here very recently in September there is personal conversations. So the science obviously is very important. Our critical literacy is very important to make sense of what good knowledge and good information is around climate change. And I think you guys are in a really wonderful position to be able to do that as third level students. So you're already among the most intelligent people in the country. So I think those personal conversations are really important. So if you're in doubt and you're like, well, what can I do? And what is this education for sustainability? Sure, I can't really play a part. There is evidence to suggest that all of those little personal conversations that you have with other people, regardless of who they are, young people, grown-ups, your granny, doesn't matter. Those personal conversations are really important as well. So I'm just going to briefly, I'm not going to cover all of this today, but I'm going to share the slides because there's loads of information on them that you can read up on further, and it's all step by step. I'm going to do just a very brief what is education for sustainability, because I do get asked that an awful lot actually. And I think part of that is coming from the misperception of even people who are in government, I would argue, where we hear this sustainable future. But often what they're talking about is economic sustainability, and economic sustainability doesn't equal sustainability of the planet, at least not always. There are some good examples where economic sustainability can be linked to the sustainability of the planet, but those examples are few and far between. So the word sustainable is thrown around all over the place. It's in the it's in the new draft program for government, but it doesn't actually mean sustainability of us as a species together with all the other species on this planet. A bit of a look at why we should focus on education for sustainability, and then how can you get involved, or what can you do through this project, I guess. So one of the key documents is the UNESCO roadmap. I can share this roadmap afterwards. Now, one of the critiques of this is that it's just another framework. Where is the action, I suppose? But I guess communication of this leads to action, I think, particularly with such a receptive, fantastic group like yourselves. And it is being integrated. Now, this is called ESD, so I also wanted to just explain that. Education for Sustainable Development and Education for Sustainability are often used interchangeably. It's debated everywhere, to be honest, and like typical academics, they just love to debate an old acronym. But I tend to use education for sustainability because I'm uncomfortable with the word development, because who's developing? Like those that are at the mercy of climate change and are suffering the most because of climate change, for example, are those who are contributing the least. And they tend to be people in the global south, who aren't as commercial and capitalist as us in the Western world here. So I'm a bit uncomfortable with it, which is why I tend to say education for sustainability. But we need to be aware that ESD is a common term as well, and indeed it's in our curriculum actually for primary and secondary. So that's important to note too. Although a review is common of the curriculum, so it is being embedded. And what does it actually mean then? Well, the outline, this is very helpful here because they give 4 key areas. So the 4 things we need to be kind of thinking about around education for sustainability is climate change, which I've already mentioned, biodiversity, disaster risk reduction, and sustainable consumption and production. So you can see that targets everything there. The economy, it targets those that are already suffering and really trying to deal on a day-to-day basis with what is happening. And then biodiversity is a huge part. So I've taken my work further around biodiversity. Maybe might share that at another panel. But biodiversity is in there as well. So basically it's supposed to empower learners to make informed decisions and responsible actions. It's about lifelong learning, so it's not just about those that are actively in education at the minute, and that's where those sort of personal conversations come from. There's lots of information out there, and we all have a duty to make sure that we're talking accurately about what's happening. It's supposed to be holistic and transformational, and it's supposed to be in a way that it's about everything that we do within education, including how we deliver education. So, for example, that big scary word pedagogy there just means the approaches that are used in your classroom. So, for example, regardless of where you're studying, things like problem-oriented pieces of work, how can we tackle this problem? How can we take action? And it's supposed to transform society. So slowly but surely, I'll keep battering the drum, and I'll keep trying to make sure that happens for many of our young people. In terms of dimensions, then nothing surprising here. It's supposed to be about everything: the content, your learning environment, your learning outcomes, and the societal transformation. So I'm hoping within the university you're going to see a bit more in terms of how learning outcomes are framed in line with education for sustainability, as well as the SDGs. Now, some of that I would argue is a bit lip servicey, but I'm trying to be involved in as many levels as I can to make sure that's not the case. Okay, so that's just a State of the Nature Report 2023, some headline findings, particularly for Northern Ireland there on the right. And not to be scary, but I guess we need to bring it back to brass tacks, don't we? And that's where biodiversity comes in as well. And you notice the video was about holding politicians to account, and we all have a part to play there, and we can all try to do that. Particularly in Northern Ireland, I think our politicians are a wee bit more accessible than they are in other places. So do hold them to account in every opportunity that you get. I've got another slide there, that why we should look at this, the local and the global again. You can engage with that a bit more after the presentation. I'm conscious of time, just don't want to take up too much. But there's lots of stats, and you feel free to use all of these stats as well. That I'm not precious about my materials, I've just gathered all this from publications that exist. So if you're doing work, feel free to use all of this, all right? If you're particularly working with others, maybe your peer groups or other people. The last point I sort of want to end on is young people's views and opinions. So I've been involved in several pieces of work with young people, and the message there is very clear. They want help, they want to be involved, they want to take action for the environment, and they want people to be held to account, and they want opportunities through school, through the curriculum, and in their communities. So I think that's reflective of a lot of the young people at the minute, and I think it's something that we need to be mindful of. Just to draw your attention again, this is another piece of documentation that you could use, the Youth Manifesto for Nature and the Environment, very recent publication. And this was put together by young people. And this was what they wanted to see in the current programme for government. Not all of it is there. So again, we need to continue holding, those decision makers to account. So these young people pulled together their asks for nature, for climate, and also then for young people. And one of the big things there was spending time outdoors and knowing about nature jobs and knowing about where to go. Again, I think that's a really important part that we can all play, being involved in the university, is looking to see, well, what sorts of careers there and how can we make a difference? So slowly but surely, involved with various different people, and we are taking action around education for sustainability, and we will continue to do so. And I'm happy to take any requests for further information around that. So I was part of this action plan here and strategy for education for sustainability as well in the last couple of years. So we'll keep doing that. And you can see my big part there is initial teacher ed, which I am doing. So another way is people say, but what can I do? What can I do? So these are the 5 things that we tend to work through with young people, things that can be easily achieved in your locality, and every little helps, and it's about being reassuring. Further guidance here if you want for yourself to, the sort of eco-anxiety. So one of the sort of critiques that we would get when we go around, doing workshops and working with young people is like, oh, you're freaking people out, what about their mental health? It's all doom and gloom. That state of nature's scary. But there are ways to talk about this, and ultimately all of the research would show that we should tackle eco-anxiety and eco-grief head on. And then when people begin to take action, people feel better, actually, and feel much more empowered, particularly young people who often feel quite disempowered in our society, unfortunately. I've kept some stats in here for you as well. I can share these slides around fast fashion, how to combat fast fashion if you want to use any of these resources with young people. For the artists among you, there are so many opportunities to get involved in very sustainable approaches to creativity as well. Recent years then, there's a chat about fast tech, same as fast fashion. We have a lot of tech lying about, and just sort of information around that fast tech stuff is all available here as well. In terms of outdoor learning then, and connection to nature, again, this is something that young people are asking for. There's evidence to show with young people in our society, not elsewhere, in Northern Ireland, that we can make a difference to their outcomes across all different domains if they are connected to nature and spend time outside learning. And I'm going to push for that at Queen's as well, that we're learning outside more regardless of what you're studying. Citizen science is another approach if there are opportunities to get involved there. Very, very effective for people of all ages. And finally then, just to give you some statistics, children and young people here, 2,400 young people in Northern Ireland, roundabouts primary 7 age, if they scored high on their self-reported well-being measure, then they scored high in terms of their connection to nature as well. So that link is really important. And this has been proved through several different studies of young people spending time outside. So in just to sum up then, a little projects with young people spending time outdoors, they have a greater understanding of sustainability, they're much more connected to nature, and they understand impact a lot better, and they tend to empower other people as well. Their health and well-being tends to be higher, their knowledge tends to be higher, and if people are connected to nature, they're way more likely to look after it in the future, and that goes for all of us, not just our children. So that's just a repeat there of some of the things that I said, and that is a wrap.
Wow, really well done, Karen. You got through so much information so quickly there.
Too fast,
no.
but I wanted everything on slides so people can email me if they want to afterwards, if anybody wants to chat through some of the other work that's happening. But that's just like a whistle-stop tour. There's so much to talk about that.
And I mean, the idea is that this is to stimulate thought. So the more information, I think, the better in some ways, because it does give people a lot of things to think about. And I thought what we might do is go through the presentations quickly and then have a chat at the end, if that makes sense. Yep. So I'm wondering, Grant, would we maybe come to you next, if that's okay with you, Baruch? So Grant, we're very fortunate Grant's joining us because he's been off traveling and has had to move fast to get back on the campus to present to us. Dr. Grant Campbell is a research fellow in the School of Biological Sciences at the University of Aberdeen in Scotland. He has very wide interests in soil science and has a particular specialism in the use of geographical information systems and maths modelling for soil health. And that means that he's currently involved in a really big EU project, which is called AI for Soil Health. So it's really looking at how you use artificial intelligence, and particularly to support farmers to make the most of new tools to measure soil health, and how AI can be used in monitoring and predicting soil health. So again, quite a different kind of a topic area than Karen has been talking about. So this is just to give you lots of different ideas and lots of different ways to think about it. So Grant, if it's okay, can I hand over to you now?
You can do it. I don't know if you can see my screen at all.
Yes, we can.
Okay. So yeah,
you might want to go into presenter mode because we can see your other slides down the side. It makes it bigger.
Just wondering if I can put it here, maybe.
Maybe you can't. It doesn't matter if you can't, but it's just a blue screen right now.
Yeah, I'm having a bit of that because I've got it on the other screen. I've got
no, it's grand. Don't worry. That's fine.
Sorry about that. Hi everybody. I hope we're all well. So as Emma has just alluded to, I am Dr. Grant Campbell. First of all, apologies for feeling a little bit jaded. I've just been back from Budapest. I was away at a project meeting for AI for Soil Health, which I'll explain a little bit more in my presentation, and I've been up on the go since 3:30 European time this morning, so I am very much on fumes at the moment. But I thought it was a good opportunity to come to this event to really kind of talk about my involvement in a project which looks at how AI can look at really opening the door and making us learn a little bit more about soils and their interactions with the environment. So I think that's really important to kind of go on a little bit about. I'll just go into my next slide here. So I thought, kind of going into this, one of my first sort of things I was thinking about when I was pulling this information together is what do I see as being the importance of soil education? Well, this is a picture taken from a Scottish research site at Glensock, very close to Aberdeenshire. This is with a group of third year and master students, mostly master students. But really, the main reason we take the students out to Glensock is to really give them ideas and some thought-provoking opportunities to look at how best to understand soils and the health of their soil, and also how the soil can impact things such as agriculture. I put agriculture here mostly because it's an agricultural site, but there's a lot of forestry takes place there. There's a lot of mixed farming takes place there. So really getting to understand some of the interactions between the soils and other land uses. There's also an opportunity for the students to learn a little bit more about soil conservation techniques. the general role of soil in the environment, and also look at potential sustainable farming practices. And the University of Aberdeen has a really good association with the James Hutton Institute in Aberdeen and Dundee. And there's a lot of toing and froing from those guys and ourselves, and also with SRUC in Aberdeen as well, that really kind of gets a little bit more of an understanding about this relationship between soils, agriculture, and much more. So bringing it on to AI a bit more specifically, what can AI do to give us a better understanding of soils? Well, the first thing it can do is really look at this kind of movement towards a better form of monitoring. And what I mean by monitoring is taking information that we know from the soil. So we go out into the field, we dig a pit, we gather information about the pit, in terms of its horizons, in terms of general characteristics, core information as well. But also what it can do is it can look at real-time analysis, so that over a period of time, whether it be a year, 2 years, 5 years, longer, we can see what is changing and what is maybe changing at a faster and slower rate, because that can give us a little bit more of an indication about what is actually going on, particularly with the relationships between the physical and chemical indicators, but crucially also the biological indicators, particularly things like earthworms and other types of soil biota. It gives us a real opportunity as well with AI to look at predictive analytics, particularly for things such as crop yield. So we can look at forecasting in terms of, well, if we know that an area within Scotland is going to be badly affected by storms, and we've also very recently experienced storm Dara, how can that long-term affect crop yields across certain sectors of the UK? So it gives us, again, this real-time forecasting about what might happen if an impact happened in an area, or, certain climate change influences have made an effect. And I know that that was mentioned in the first presentation, and looking as well at things like the effects of temperature, rainfall, and much more. It also helps us in some ways, or should look to help us in more ways, to help us with sampling and testing. There's a real problem in soil science with the lack of professional soil surveyors to go out and actually dig soil pits. One, because they are mostly retired, or they've moved on to new ventures, or they have moved into different forms of soil science, whether that's in the laboratory, whether that's doing GIS mapping. And, I think having something like this can help us kind of gain a better understanding of the traditional soil sampling and testing against what maybe some of the computing technology could help us to provide. And that kind of leads on to things like using machine learning models. So things such as classification regression trees, things like boosted trees, things like marsh splines, things like that. All sorts of opportunities there for machine learning to take place. I'm not going to open this up, but I was at a recent meeting in Rothamsted, which looked at what's the thing I was looking for? Looking at digital twins, and looking at the impact of AI, which can be used in different sectors, whether that be soil science and my work, or other sectors such as health, life sciences, and much more. And I've passed on the slides to Emma to share, but you can look at that blog post a little bit later on to kind of get a little bit of an idea as to what kinds of things I was seeing at this meeting, and what I think is going to be the major questions that we're going to have to address long term as well. So kind of one thing that Emma did say to me in terms of the introduction is to kind of discuss a little bit about AI for soil health. So what is AI for soil health? Well, it's a EU mission-funded project led by Aarhus University in Denmark. And in the next couple of slides, there's 4 kind of key themes of the project. The first of this is to co-design, create, and maintain a digital infrastructure using advanced AI methods to monitor and assess soil health. Now, that seems a bit of a mouthful, but what it really is looking at what we currently understand in terms of how we are monitoring and assessing soil health anyway, what indicators or metrics can be used, and using digital technology, using GIS and mapping, how can we use the known information to help us produce potentially new, exciting information that could maybe look at the future as well as current trends. And this sort of leads into this development of a digital twin, which uses as a functionality to replicate a biophysical system, and looking at the continuous monitoring of soil health metrics, which I sort of explained in my last comment. Then this sort of moves on to really talking about, well, who are we actually looking at this? You know, AI for soil health is very much a multi-stakeholder project. So it's not just purely about the science, it's about policy, and it's about other stakeholder groups. And the major output of the project is to look at some tools that can help support farmers, land managers, policymakers to help better inform decision making. And something like this AI for Soil Health Data Cube for Europe, which is being led by colleagues at Open GeoHub Foundation in the Netherlands, are really pushing to try and make this a major product as part of the project. And we also want to look at, as I said, management practices to help support EU policy and EU databases such as the EU Soil Observatory, and help contribute to the soil deal for Europe, which is the major thing that is happening within the EU mission at present. So to kind of wrap things up a little bit, and I realize I'm getting close to my 10 minutes, I think personally there's 4 sort of themes that I think soil education could really be used in AI to help with. Now, what I will say with this is that I feel that AI is in a very interesting position, but we have to be very careful about how we manage it, how we use it, and also accept whether it might be right or maybe wrong in some ways, and we need a little bit more information. You cannot replicate reality, and it might not be the panacea for all ills at present. But I think with a little bit of training, a little bit of knowledge, I think it could be a major player. But I do think there has to be some trepidation with it, but there's also some excitement with AI as well. And as I mentioned there, I think the integration of AI can really be used to help improve real-time soil monitoring, looking at ways that which we can investigate items for more precision and more focused agriculture, to revolutionize soil management practices, and also to really improve that collaboration between different stakeholders such as soil scientists, AI experts, finance, and business. And I think that's very important to consider as well. And this is my final slide, which is basically me talking a lot of rubbish over a soil pit with a few of the master students, just really getting them to focus in on some of the key aspects of traditional soil science. And that's one thing I want to finish up by saying about this. You cannot beat traditional soil science surveying, but I do think that AI can play a really big part in terms of giving us a greater understanding and feeling of what is happening in the ground beneath our feet. So thanks very much for allowing me to share my presentation and to talk through that. And I'll hand you back to you, Emma. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Grant. And I mean, again, I think this goes to like how wide the remit potentially is of this. So you have everything right from education for sustainable development and teacher education right through to the use of AIS, the use of new technologies. So all of these are things that are going to come into play when you are thinking about education for soil health. So it's to try and give you just a feel for all of the different aspects. And I think we're just going to try and get Baruch's presentation up now. Thank you very much, Grant. And again, I'm sure there'll be some questions at the end.
No problem. I should say before Baruch sets up his presentation that my contact details are also on that presentation. So like Karen, people have questions, but they maybe don't want us to talk about it here, they feel free to email me and I'll try to respond when I can.
Brilliant. And I guess you guys will get the presentations through to me. And thank you for that. Okay, and hopefully you'll be able to see Baruch's as well. We'll be able to share it. Probably from the window, is it? Yes. Are you able to see that okay? Karen, just wondering.
Yeah, I
We
can see it
can't
fine.
see you now. You can see it fine now. Brilliant.
Yeah, no problems coming up, no problem. Yeah.
Oh, so I need to introduce you, Baruch. Sorry, I got distracted there by all the tech. So Baruch Sal is an entrepreneur, a no-dig gardener, a soil educator, and a PhD student as well. So we're very fortunate to have him here because he clearly has an awful lot of different roles he fulfills. He runs Ha Organics at Helens Bay Walled Garden for 3 seasons, 2020 through to 2022. He's halfway through a PhD in the School of Biological Sciences here at Queen's, studying sustainability of growing one's own food. He works at West Winds Primary School as a soil educator, bringing gardening ideas and activities to primary and nursery school children. And he's also really well known across the horticultural community in Northern Ireland as a passionate proponent of no-dig gardening. Thank you very much for being here, Baruch.
That was very generous. It's good to hear about yourself. Yes, thank you very much, everybody, for coming here, and Karen and Grant. It's really interesting to see the science of it, but I'm coming from the practitioner of it type of thing. I'm not a soil scientist as such. I'm not even a horticulturalist. I was an animal scientist and dairy scientist. And then now I come to this country and become a gardener by accident. And then that just took off, and it just taken me so many places. And that's when I did market gardening in Helens Bay Organics for 3 years, creating veg boxes every week and delivering that. And then I go into schools, West Winds, to teach about soil. It's not about soil, it's about food, but then finally it become about soil. So that's what I want to talk to you about, is that gardeners as an informal educator for soil health. So we'll just go through that. So yes, so as a teacher in schools, I only go in Monday morning. They call it Hahu Mondays. I go in Monday morning, and what we do is we have a raised bed. Every class has a raised bed, and we do all the seasonal activities that you can do about gardening. We prepare our bed. We make compost. We plant. We sow seeds, and we just engage with the kids. And it is with primary school children, so they are hands-on experience. But in that, as a gardener, what I am doing is I'm not teaching them about soil, but I'm teaching them about seasonal food production. Maybe I'm sharing sustainable practice when we do the no-dig method, or when we do recycling, composting, and all that is like we're sharing the sustainable, different sustainable practices. And also we're bridging the gap between science. So when we see the AI and soil health and all the things that can happen within the soil and all that, and teaching that to anybody else, in a layperson, it's very hard. It's very complicated. So we need to merge those two together. There's science, but there's also this message that we can pass to everybody else to look after soil, because soil, after all, is just part of us, and without soil, we can't move much. So the message I want to give you today is, when I teach in the schools, the main message might be about, for example, composting. It can be no-dig gardening that day, or maybe it can be mulching, it can be bed preparation, seed sowing. But at the heart of it, it's always about soil, because it's on the soil that we work, and it's on the soil that we get the vegetables, or the pests come from the soil. Everything happens within the soil, and that mysterious thing that we don't understand is the thing I want to pass to my students, or to my kids as well, and to everybody else who listen to my no-dig workshops, is about the soil. And the soil has, at the end, I'll just say, it's just alive, and it has this many qualities within it that we can't understand, and we need to understand that we don't understand it, so we can work with it better. In a way, for example, we might be talking about wormery in my school. We used to have wormery, and I always advise them to put some, they can't do food, but we do some weeding and we put it to the worms, and there's a worm cast, there's a worm pit. All that is, the idea is the decomposition. So it gives them a good understanding of decomposition. So that's a way of teaching them. And this is not only fascinating for the kids, it's wherever I go and I open the wormery and show it to people, it's really fascinating. It just opens people's imagination to say, wow, this is, I can see it. I can see what compost making is. I can see what decomposition is, what happens when something dies. It just becomes soil at the end of it. So you can see the process. These earthworms, they eat their body weight a day. You can imagine, if you have hundreds of them, they just eat as much as they can in a day and devour things. And the other thing I usually do is a no-dig method. I talk a lot about no-dig, not disturbing the soil. And when I talk about the soil, then I have to talk about compost, because in the Nordic method we're using compost. When I talk about Nordic method, I talk about the house that the earthworms build, that the burrows they have, that it is constant. When we plow the land or when we turn it over, it means we're destroying their habitat, and that is one thing. I talk about the biodiversity. We talk a lot about biodiversity because we see earthworms being that one little creature, but also then who else lives in the soil that we can see? We can see the beetles running about. We can see spiders, spider mites, many things we can see, but also there are things we can't see. So that's what I try to create in the kids' imagination, that there is so much happening in the soil. And also it's very common if you do any gardening in here, especially in the winter, there's always a robin that came sat beside you and look for that worm. It's also that is a biodiversity that kids can understand. Birds are around you, some other animals might be around you, and you just open this imagination, like soil health is connected. The birds are part of the soil. We are part of the soil. The earthworm is part of the soil. Everything is connected. And it means that the healthier the soil and the healthier whatever we bring out of it. So then the next inspiring thing that you can do to kids is show them the food and make them taste the food and grow food and harvest and show them. And this is a clear link. When I start gardening, I have no idea what soil is. I still don't try to worry about soil pH or things like that. It just gets too complicated for me. It's like, oh, my pH is this. I wouldn't worry about that sometimes. I just go on. If I look after my soil, it will look after my plants. This is the message I usually do. It means like healthy soil would provide you with healthy vegetables. And there's exchange of sugar, exchange of nutrients from the plant to the microbe, from microbes to the plants, mineral accessibility. A recent research I saw about iron deficiency in India. The soil was iron deficient, but it was cultivated organically. So the microbes within the soil were able to fork out iron from the soil, give it to the plant, to the rice, and the people are not iron deficient. And when they see it, the soil shows as iron deficiency, but the microbes were able to fork that out because of the health of the soil. And then this will take us to this idea of soil being the idea that a single teaspoonful of soil, maybe you heard about this, it always inspires me. How many microbes do live in a single teaspoonful of soil? It's like more people, more microorganisms than people owners. You can imagine how much. There was a regenerative festival in Northern Ireland recently, and they were showing a microscope of a little drop of water mixed with soil on the screen, and you can see the amount of life going on. It just feels like a town, the movement of it. So it's just like that is something to say to people, to teach them about soil health, is that, look, this thing is full of life, and it's not something that we can disregard. It's not something that we can say that it is dirt or something. Our life depends on the soil, the health of the soil. And you can go into science and think about the nematodes, the fungi that lives there. And there's a number of hierarchies, food web that's happening within the food. All of them have like extremely positive impact on the soil. We teach our kids about germs, washing hands, and then the soil being dirty, and but there are, most of the germs we find in the soil are healthy, and the bad ones are only a small fraction of them. So if we keep it very healthy, and if we maintain it, if we keep the structure of it, if we don't dig it, for example, is all these guys in there are working with us, and we might not understand what they are doing. We might not understand who is responsible for which microbe or which mineral, but at the end of the day, the message we want to pass to people is that soil actually is alive. Yeah. It might sound very complex, but it is so simple. If you don't try to dig into it, just understand that soil is alive actually, and I can say that to people, and then they can start to care about it. And if we care for our soil, then everything will be cared for us. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Baruch. And actually, just on that point of the soil is alive, it's making me think about. I was at a conference last week in Cardiff, and it was the British Soil Society Soil Science Conference. An artist had actually taken soil from 150 years ago and put it on photographic paper, and he was able to see that it was still alive 150 years later, which was amazing. Actually, the photographs are quite beautiful. I must share it with you.
Yeah.
But it's still alive 150 years later, and there is apparently an art exhibition which is soil. It's in New York. It's just soil, and it's been there like for 40 years, and they still have to weed it. They still have to wait 40 years later, and it's just been in an art museum. So, like, it's alive,
Yeah.
alive permanently. So thank you all three for this. That has been just such a diversity of views and a diversity of inputs, I think, for the students to think about. I am wondering, does anyone have any questions? I'll maybe try and get that back just on the screen where we can see Karen and Karen and Grant as well. I'm just giving you a second to think about your questions while I do that. Anything? Everyone is thinking very deeply. I'm just letting you know, I can see. One thing I did wonder actually, because Grant, I know when we first spoke, you started talking about soil and literature. And I just thought as a different kind of an input, I know you're going to say it's an interest, it's not your expert area. I just wondered if you might want to say a couple of words on that as well, as just a sort of a diverse point of view.
What do you mean by soil literature?
You remember you were talking about actually in novels and in different you've been talking about forensic science and that kind of thing.
Yes. So I mean, I have a colleague of mine. I don't work with her now, but Lorna Dawson at the James Hunt Institute. She does a lot of work with forensic soil science, which really looks at how to unpack or solve a crime, which looks at some of the different kind of sections of geography, genetics, looking at even things like the soil in trainers or on tires and things like that, looking at mapping and GIS, looking at the chemistry, looking at all sorts of different things. And she's been really heavily influenced in a lot of TV programs and novels. People like Stuart McBride here in Scotland have, used her as a pseudonym in a book or two. Val McDermott has as well. But also I think as well, when I was talking about kind of soil literature, and I think that was why I wanted to just double check the questions, because there's a lot of kind of schools of thought with soil. We've got things like soil protection, we've got things like soil health, we've got soil fertility, we've got soil quality, we've got natural capital, we've got ecosystem services. And I'm in the middle of writing a paper at the moment with my colleague David Robinson at UKCH and others to really kind of unpack that word quality and how it can sit against different ways to really tackle this soil health debate. Because, depending on the stakeholder, depending on the scale, depending on the situation of your environment, you might need to take a different tack in terms of understanding more about your soils, whether it is a binary yes or no approach, whether that's sort of like looking at things against the distribution of other people in an environment, whether you look at it from a sort of economic value assessment sort of approach. And also looking, as I said, against, kind of historical freedom from degradation as well. So I'm in the middle of writing that paper up at the moment. Hoping to get it published early next year. But I think that's a kind of track that I think soil science as a kind of discussion point is going, because there's so many different buzzwords or terms that we know, but it's which one is better than the other, which one's more appropriate. And ultimately, I think they all have a case, but it depends on the context. And ultimately, I think, we have to bite the bullet and say, well, what's the consensus? And we need to go down this way. I don't know. Maybe Karen has a point on that, and I don't know.
You thinking about it, Karen?
Yeah.
I mean, soil development. I know you don't like that term development, but I mean, that's another term I've seen loosely used.
Yeah. I just think that there's so much happening in all like different, first of all, at all different levels, but in all different sort of work packages that people are involved in. You know, so I suppose where I'm coming from is the generic education for sustainability for
Yeah.
students and pupils and learners and lifelong learners at all stages. But I do think that there's a lot of misconceptions. I know Baruch just touched on that around soil, and it's really important part. And I think even people like myself that are working in education for sustainability, ultimately you do bits of work on soil. How can you not? So that
Exactly.
you know that citizen science project did have a soil survey, and little ones were out doing soil surveys, and Brooke's there in school talking with wee ones about soil and not to fear soil, not to fear getting dirty, etc. So I think we all have a part to play. I don't know if that answers your question, but
No, I think it does, and I think it comes back to communication and engagement. You know,
yeah,
that's where
yeah.
the citizen science comes in. I think it's articulating it to the audience, the groups of people it's involved with, whether it's at primary level, secondary level, university level, where I work, and the others that's there in QUB may have an interesting view on where it can take with us. In terms of where AI sits, I think AI is a sort of umbrella, or could sit as an umbrella over everything else. We need to understand, in my opinion, the concrete, or the the foundations, pardon the pun, of where soils is and its relationship with land use, with different types of situations. And I think that's got to be where we really focus our energies on. And then I think the AI comes in a little bit later on, because I think it could help improve our understanding a little bit. And I personally, and this is just my personal opinion, I don't think it can mirror reality fully, because I think, like, from a social point of view, the farmers will have so much more knowledge of their own land than AI will, because there's a sentimental impact there. There's a personal impact there because they're working on their land on a regular basis. They know their landscape better than I'm sure any technology would. The technology will have a try at it, but I don't think it can fully mirror the reality, because AI needs feelings, or in inverted commas, and it doesn't have that feeling, if you know what I mean. I don't know if that's the term I'm meaning, but it's emotionless. And I think the emotional part of soils, I think, is very important to understand as well, which is why, even some of the survey and stuff that I've been involved with, we want to get the students to actually feel the soil in their hands, experience, the textures and stuff like that. And I'm sure you're in the same position, Karen, with your folks, and obviously with the gardening examples as well. That hands-on, it's so important. It
I'm
really is.
just wondering if anybody has any. I see Callum as a question. I'm wondering if anybody else has anything that you're thinking about.
You can, Karen and Grant, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was wondering if each of you could actually, it maybe picks up on what Grant said there, but the emotional aspect. And I know each one of you do outdoor learning. Grant showed the photo, and obviously the other two do as well. If maybe speak a bit on your experience of that, and maybe do you see a change in students, in people who engage in outdoor learning, or what is the impact of doing sort of soil-based or sustainability, environmental education outside, as opposed to always in the classroom?
And I wonder, Baruch, maybe would we come to you first on that? I don't know
That's a
if
good
you'd be
point.
happy to come up here, just because then you're kind of visible for the recording. Sorry, we're having to tag team a bit.
Yes, the emotional side of things, it's always is connected, isn't it? Well, if it's not a human action, then why are we caring to develop it, or to maintain it, or to devour it even? But from my experience over the years, whenever I go to school and teach gardening, it was a hard job to find, to convince schools to take me in and to do that. But nowadays, even some other friends I work with, they are very, very extremely busy. Schools are very interested. We had in Derry, we had teachers training for Nordic gardening, and the first few minutes almost for the online one, 120 teachers, signed up, and there's a physical one. For the physical one, almost 20 teachers came from all over the country to learn about Nordic gardening, and there's the interest to build something in their school and to show the kids. There are things we did in Holybush in primary school, which we just used the P7 students to come and do stuff, and that just triggered a whole lot of action from the teacher. So I think there is the movement coming to it. People are slightly aware of their soil.
Maybe Karen, if you might, I know we're coming to the end of our time. If you might say something quick.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the connection to nature, literature, and all of the studies around that are all going in the same direction. And now there's so much evidence that the actual hands-on, being outside, connecting with, if it's a soil, great, but nature generally, and it leads to improved guardianship, it leads to behavior change. So some people have stated that climate change is actually it's a behavioral crisis, and that I think a lot of people know what they have to do, but the behaviors maybe just aren't happening. That behavioral change isn't happening. So we've shown time and time again that spending time learning outside or being outside or connecting with nature outside will lead to improved guardianship of all aspects of the environment, to include soil, I would imagine. And I think that just as a practitioner, as Barak's saying there, this fear of getting dirty and what's perceived as being, being outside and being dirty is a really big issue in schools. And the more that we can do even to overturn that with getting children involved in even playing with soil and being in soil and interacting with soil is a way to connect, definitely. It's a very strong way to connect, actually. And I think there are some more scientific studies around immune systems and kids' immune systems and things like that. I was fascinated by that slide with all of the little creepies and all of the bits that are in soil, that they're all working for us and they're all working together. And there's actually, the chances of anything being overly harmful is actually very, very small. Well, I mean, I haven't got my youngest boy or the big boy who plays rugby in the soil to ever wash their hands before they eat their dinner if they've been playing outside, and they're grand. So, again, that sort of over cleanliness of recent generations is actually a bit worrying, to be perfectly frank. So we can't beat the connection to the environment and the connection to nature, really, in terms of moving forward and looking after our planet, I think.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Karen. And maybe we'd give the last word over to Grant, who's obviously the only person joining us from outside Northern Ireland. If you have any last reflections, also you're the tiredest person likely, Grant, so you'll probably keep it short.
Well, I'll try my best to. I think there's two things I want to say. The first thing is that I, in my undergraduate thesis, looked at experiences of geographical fieldwork in 2012. I'll need to try and dig out the results of that, because more and more when I'm talking to people about this, it almost feels like I should reprise that in some ways and maybe turn it into a paper. But I did do that as part of my undergraduate dissertation over in geography, actually, where I did my degree here at the university in 2009 to 2013. I've kind of gone full circle in my life and come back here. So that's one thing I wanted to kind of state with that. The second thing I wanted to state with is in the University of Aberdeen, we have a soil science course whereby led by Paul Hallett here, who does a very, very good job, Graham Payton as well. And they get the third year and the postgraduate students, of which I saw a few pictures earlier on, to go out into the field, different sorts of environments around Aberdeenshire, and get to understand the different types of soils and the relationships that they have with the land uses and landscapes across Aberdeen City and Aberdeenshire. And it's a really, really good idea for them to get into the field. Yes, learn a little bit of the theory as well in the classrooms and some of the tests and some of the presentations that they do as well, and the essays that they write. But you can't beat going out into the field and actually experiencing these soils in their natural environment. And, I think I was out at the Glen Sock trip, and it was absolutely fantastic, seeing the changes from a soil down a Katina profile and seeing the changes that took place in just a few square kilometers across a field. I thought it was really, really interesting to see that. So I think in the shortcoming of this, I think there's a lot of connectivity between everything we do. And in fact, just a very quick last point, in terms of the garden, I think it's a really, really good way to get young kids interested in horticulture, the relationship between flowers, the relationship between food and health as well. You know, my mum works in a primary school. She does that with her kids that she works with there. Maybe subconsciously that works on me as well. I don't do a lot of gardening personally, but my brother does. You know, we've got friends we know who work in allotments. So I think more and more people are beginning to have a relationship with the soil, but I think it's taken them an indirect way to get there, which I think is quite interesting. Whereas we're looking at it from a very theoretical point of view, or certainly we're more at the sharp end of it. So for me, I think opportunities like this, we need to keep promoting them, because that's the way I think we're going to sell soil science as being a really enterprising and enjoyable way of research. I'll stop there.
That is fantastic. Thank you so much. And thank you all for sparing this time on a dark Friday evening, or not. Oh my God,
Oh.
today is Monday.
Monday.
Today is Monday. See, my week's over. Yeah. A dark Monday evening, and particularly for those of you who've been ill and who've been traveling and so on. Thank you so much. We will share your slides. If you get them onto me, I'll get them onto the students. Obviously, you're both on our community of practice anyway, so we'll be sharing back the work that the students do. And we will be keeping in touch with you. But in the meantime, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time, and we'll keep in touch with you.
No
Thanks
worries
so
at all.
much.
Thanks, Emma, and
Good
all the very
luck.
best, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye now.
Bye.